No. There's some. Okay. I'm from the Air Force Judge Advocate, and that means I'm a lawyer. So I know that scares a lot of you because you don't like letting lawyers into the room because you think we prevent you from having fun with these tools. I've been doing social media since 2007. I was the attorney for the Federal Emergency Management Agency when we had a little bit of a PR problem in about 2007, just a little. And these tools were starting to come about, and our public affairs people thought this was a great way to get some of our preparedness message out, because that's where people were starting to talk. And one of our videographers was assigned the job of setting up a YouTube page. And he remembered his ethics training, which he should because he videoed the ethics training every year. So we know he watched it. And when he went to click that I agree button, he knew that he wasn't authorized to sign it. And he was the first one in government to realize he wasn't authorized to click that I agree button. And so he came to us, and I got involved in how to design a social media program and identifying all those rules that you now have. So I'm sorry. I apologize for why you can't just go out there and do things. But we like to try to find ways to let you do things within the parameters we have as a federal agency. And so in 2008, 2009, we started figuring out all these rules. And at FEMA, we actually put forth the first Web 2.0 policy, as we called it. And we required our public affairs office, when they wanted to look at a new tool, they had to vet it through legal, privacy, our cybersecurity folks, and our records folks. Because we realized that even though you're putting this information out in cyberland, or out in the information black hole, that these were federal records. And we wanted to make sure that we properly captured them. And we were actually really concerned because we were afraid that someone would post things like, "Help, I need to be rescued," to Twitter. And we had to put little disclaimers saying that. But we wanted to make sure we captured all those things. So, and why do we have to keep records? Well, first of all, what is a record? And there are multiple definitions of a record. And before I get further, I want to tell you that one of the hardest things about doing legal advice for social media is that the laws we are using are old. Really, 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 really old, especially in the technological world. The Federal Records Act was originally released in 1940. Yes. So I am applying a law from 1940 to 2017. Now, Congress did a really nice thing, and they amended it for us in November 2015, after there was a little controversy about someone in emails. And what they did was they slightly changed the definition of what is a record. And this is the definition up here of a record under the Federal Records Act. And it includes any recorded information, regardless of form or characteristics, made or received by a federal agency under federal law in connection with a transaction of public business. Well, social media is made or received by an agency under our business rules. If you weren't doing this under conducting federal business, then we wouldn't need you guys because I couldn't pay for you under appropriated funds. So if you want to be paid for using appropriated funds, then what you're creating is records. Now this is step one. And I'm going to tell you, with the Federal Records Act, there are certain rules about how we keep records. But there are other laws. But first of all, what types of records are there under the Federal Records Act? The first type is transitory. These are those emails you send to your coworker. Hey, you want to go to lunch? Or, hey, let's get out of here early, which probably you shouldn't do on the government information system. And definitely don't send emails about committing crimes on the government information system. That's really bad. But those type of things we don't keep. We just delete, and those can be deleted. Temporary records, that's anything that's not considered permanent. And what's considered permanent is, that means it's transferred to NARA, the National Archives, to be kept as part of the permanent history of the United States. Now, the archivists like records. They like to keep records. In fact, you can go on NARA's website and read, if you like the musical Hamilton, you can go read all the letters written by Alexander Hamilton during the Revolutionary War on behalf of George Washington. It's all right there on their website. If you're into genealogy and you had someone who served in the military 100 years ago in the Civil War, you can go visit the archives down in Washington and go find your ancestors' military records. They keep everything that they seem part of the permanent history of the United States. So what we do is we have what's called record schedules. And that determines whether a record is permanent or temporary. Now, if something is not scheduled, that means it's permanent until it's scheduled. It's considered unscheduled, but that means you have to keep it until someone gets around to scheduling it. And to schedule it, it means that your local records officer has to fill out a lot of paperwork, which we know they don't like to do, and then they have to send it over to NARA. Our records officer calls it the Great NARA. I laugh and tell them it's NARA. It's not like they have nuclear weapons. They have paper. But they do own the copy of the Constitution, so they do have some worthwhile things. And we're joking when we criticize NARA. But then they sit on it, and their archivists look at it, and they determine if it fits in with, is it the right type of information. And then if they like it, they send it to the archivist of the United States, who signs off on it. And only then, when they send it back to your agency, do you have it scheduled. Now, hopefully that can be done within a year. But we all know how bureaucracy works, and it might take a little longer. And until that time, you have to keep everything. It's a wonderful process. But that's only the definition under the Federal Records Act. And we have a couple other laws that we're subject to, because Congress has a little problem, and they never check the law they wrote the first time when they do a law similar. And then they change the definitions, and everyone throws their hands up because we don't know what the right definition is. So our next law that we look at is FOIA. You guys all know what FOIA is, the Freedom of Information Act? That's that law that lets everybody write to us and tell us they want our information. Well, the definition of a record under FOIA is anything created or obtained by the agency, or under the agency's control at the time of the FOIA request. So even if you could kind of argue that social media isn't government business, the accounts are under our control. So therefore, they are FOIA records. And that includes when a DoD contractor has records. They are agency records. And yes, we don't have contracts with most of our social media platforms. They are free. We don't have real contracts, but they have that type of relationship as a consultant, quote unquote. And under FOIA, email and draft records are records. So under the Federal Records Act in 1940, how did we keep records in 1940? Come on, paper. Where did we put them? File cabinets. Big rooms this size full of file cabinets, right? So what would happen is you'd have a memo, and someone would type up a draft. And everyone would coordinate on it. There are 20 million ways, because we're DoD, and you need 30 people to look at one memo before it can become signed, right? 30 is low. Usually it's 100. And it has to go through, what, 7 versions, right? Anyway, so once it gets that final signature, which they signed in ink, someone would then take it to wherever it got published and take that final version, and they would stick it in the filing cabinet. And that was the record. All the other versions were considered working papers or drafts. Well, now we don't work that way, do we? We sit on our little computers and we create policy statements in email. Or worse, over link and Skype. How many people have had decisions made over a tweet? we're starting to see policy being made over Twitter, right? So now we're talking about less working papers and more records. So that's why this becomes really, really important. Now, these type of records under FOIA include audio, video, things in electronic database, documents in storage, and draft documents and emails kept on your computer. So you're really not supposed to delete all those emails out your computer. They're supposed to be scheduled and put in its right disposition schedule. And you're definitely not supposed to take them with you everywhere you go and keep them for 20 years of your career. But we know that's not current reality. So the third law is the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and e-discovery. And you're asking, why am I talking to you about litigation when you're social media people? Litigation and social media don't usually go together. Although you're starting to see lawyers asking for people's Facebook accounts during divorce hearings and everything else. And those Facebook algorithms and Twitter algorithms are so good that they know what people are thinking before they do. And by the way, naming Facebook and Twitter is not an endorsement. I'm required to say that via the ethics rules, because the Air Force and DOD do not endorse any non-federal government entities, organizations, or products. And remember those 10 words, because they get you out of trouble if you put them on all your social media posts. So, under the e-discovery rules, there's a definition of what's called electronically stored information. And this is even more broader, because under the litigation rules, we have to provide all the metadata that goes along with those records. So all your tweets and all the metadata that goes with it now have to be provided under the discovery rules, which makes us all subject to all these little laws. So every time you create a record, every time you send a tweet, you post something on Facebook, you put a picture on Instagram, you've now created a record. So what does that mean? Now you have to find a way to capture it or have access to it, because if someone requests it or wants it, you have to provide it. And if we can't provide it, if it's under discovery, we can get sanctioned. And sanction levels are now up to about $8.5 million. If we don't answer FOIA requests within 20 days, because it takes us so long to try to find something, we can have to pay attorney's fees, which can be $20,000, $30,000 per case. So it becomes real money over time. So that's why this is important. Plus, if we don't have the tweets, then Congress gets upset. And the last thing we want to do is upset Congress, because then they pass more laws, which make it harder for us to do our jobs. So we started talking about records and record scheduling. So the way around all this is to have a record schedule when you can delete the information. Let me back up and say that. And that applies to e-discovery, FOIA, and everything else. If we deleted it, if our record schedule to keep the information is 3 years, and someone requests the information in 3 years and 2 days, and we deleted it on day 3 years, we just provide them the record schedule and say it's gone. And that's how we get out of it. So that means we need to have a record schedule for every type of information. And we started talking to NARA about this in about 2008. But we mentioned NARA is a little slow. And just recently, I forgot this slide. So we talked about Web 2.0 applications, keeping them, etc. So this year, NARA produced GRS, which is General Record Schedule, 6.4 Rule 20. And this is going to help you guys. What this does is public correspondence and communication not requiring formal action. Doesn't that sound like responses to Facebook posts and tweets? And this is the criteria. Writing campaigns, personal opinions, routine complaints, anonymous communication, suggestion box, public correspondence addressed to another entity. There's more. Comments posted on the website that do not require response. Communications from the public, but takes no formal actions. So if these things fall under your social media posts, which most of them should, then they are temporary. And they can be deleted after 90 days. So you no longer have to keep them for 10 years. 90 days, you can get rid of them. And there's a link to the actual schedule. So you can shred them. You can delete them. You can put them on a dartboard and put holes in them. Whatever you want to do to get rid of them. Since they're public, you can throw them in the open trash because they don't contain CUI. Do whatever you want with them and get them out of our system, because then when I get a FOIA request or a discovery request, I don't have to produce them. It's better for you, it's better for us. So what do you do with this, and what has the Air Force done? We actually have our own way ahead, and we've actually adopted the rule and put it into our records disposition schedule in Table 35, Rule 30 and 31. So now we can keep our records from our social media accounts for 90 days, and then we can hit the delete button, and we're good. So that's about what I had. I know you guys have some questions on how this all works. And the other thing we can do, too, is just so you know, if you don't like the 90-day rule and want to make it shorter or longer, you can go back to NARA and get your own record schedule. You can have a schedule that says delete delete when no longer needed. What's no longer needed? 5 seconds after you get it. And as long as you have that piece of paper that says that, delete away. If you don't have the piece of paper or you haven't adopted this rule into your record schedule, you have to keep it. That means you can copy and paste it. You can hit print screen. You can PDF and PDF your social media page. Anything that you can do to keep it. It does not have to be complicated. It just has to be done. This includes you make a typo during the tweet and just copy, paste it somewhere else before you delete it, and then repost it. So all those things need to be saved. So does anyone have questions?
Hi, Jodi. This is Natasha, obviously from Air Force Social Media, and I just want to thank you for all of your help and also Mary's office with helping us move this forward. So I just want to tell everyone this is a journey, and if you're not putting records management as part of your standard operating procedures, that's a good place to start. Really think about that. Even think about when you're starting new platforms. What about disappearing content? How are you capturing this stuff? Because even for the 90 days, that's still a lot of content. So again, look at giving yourself that social media checkup to see where you need to make improvements.
And that's a great point. And that's why at FEMA we recommended that if you're going to use a new tool, that you bring your records people in as part of your evaluation. So you can have that as part of your standard operating procedures, along with your privacy folks and your legal, to help you get through those obstacles.
All right. Sergeant Cook, I'm with the Air Force social media team as well. So if I create a Facebook post and hit publish and it's out there in the world, is Facebook's platform an okay place for me to keep that record? Or do I need to keep a record of my Facebook posts out of that third-party software?
As long as we have access to that record, I don't see any reason why we need to bring it inside our servers at this point in time, especially if you have a record schedule where you're going to delete after 90 days. If you're looking at a platform where it's going to disappear, then you probably do need to bring it in. But again, everything is based on the technological tool of how you come to that solution. If you feel you can hold it in place, then hold it in place.
So this is Natasha again from the Air Force. So our new updated AFI 35-107 does direct social media account owners to export their content every 30 days because that was published before we got the RDS updated. So we still want people to get in the habit of exporting whatever you can for the 30 days to meet the 90-day requirement for the Air Force.
Yep. And like I said, we're going to have to look at that on a tool-by-tool basis probably too.
I think I broke it. Oh, there we go. So I'm just following up on these last two comments. Facebook does have the option to pull a scheduled post. So with the Air Force, is it okay if your content providers schedule it to be pulled on day 91
Yes.
so that it's no longer publicly available?
Yes, as long as you have that table and rule. If that's your table and rule, or whatever your schedule is.
So we're talking about public posts, but what if, as part of how you do business, is you use direct messages or something like that? So I will tell you, if you get a FOIA, for example, how would you then get that information? And that's not necessarily exported with the account. So, and I will tell you, getting a FOIA for all your direct messages is actually a very real reality. So again, thinking about how would you do that? Do you need to work with Twitter? Is there inappropriate content that would need to be redacted from that information? Or do you even need to use direct messages as part of your program? So think about how you do
And actually,
business.
I would recommend that you don't use direct messaging at all, because then you're having a non-public conversation with a member of the public on a third-party platform, and then you're allowing that third party to see that information, which then isn't protected. So using direct messages for a lot of reasons under privacy and other issues is kind of bad, and it gives that third party an advantage. So it's really not good to use the direct messaging if you can turn those off. That's why we recommend that everything that you post be public.
We have an online question from Evan Dyson. He asks, can you talk about deleting of social media presences no longer in use? What parameters do we have to use to do that?
So as long as you maintain the records per your disposition schedule, you can delete the profile. If you're going to delete it in general, and you capture the records to another medium, like PDF, copy and paste, screenshots, whatever, and you capture all that information, then you can delete it as long as you maintain it for what's in your disposition schedule. Sorry.
Do you have anything else to add, ma'am?
If no one has anything else, good luck. My other advice is make sure that, look, I know you hate us lawyers, but we're here to help. And ask questions. We can guide you. So, call us, email us. We'll try to help you. And the other advice I'm going to give you to working with lawyers are usually technologically phobic. It's part of our career field. We just don't like technology. So if you have a new tool and you need your lawyer to help you, show them how the tool works. Sit down with them and go through the technology, and they'll be able to give you better advice. So that's some general advice I give the lawyers and tell them to play with it. So as the social media people, the same advice to you is show them how it works and what you're trying to do. And that way you'll get better advice and be able to use more things. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, so next you can see on the schedule we have 1355, Clayton Filipovich from Airman Magazine over Defense Media Activity. We were lucky enough to have him as a DINFOS instructor for a little while before he went over to the dark side, like we like to say. Teasing, that's our headquarters. We're just joking, just joshing you. Okay, don't be mad. All right, so we're going to be back at 1355, so that gives you a bit longer of a break to socialize, network together. And we're working on getting some coffee over next door. So if you see Tech Sergeant White come in with some coffee, then you don't ambush him. Please allow him to put it where you can actually pour it into your cups. Appreciate it. Thank you.